So this Chris Eubank Jr. Conor Benn fight is reportedly being held up by a dispute in negotiations over a rehydration clause. Now, as we know, Conor Benn campaigns at 147 pounds. Chris Eubank Jr. is primarily a middleweight at 160 pounds. So there is a big weight difference, you would imagine. I've seen both guys in person on a number of occasions, and Chris Eubank Jr. is massively bigger than Conor Benn. Conor Benn is very small. If you see this guy in real life, he's a real small guy. And Chris Eubank Jr., not just taller, but just bigger all round. So, Conor Benn trying to drain Eubank Jr., let's just be real, you can understand why he would do that. Because he's trying to level up the playing field a little bit. But whether Eubank Jr. will be willing to adhere to a rehydration clause, because presumably Eubank Jr. is already coming down to whatever the weight they're talking about, 156, 157. And if he's already doing that, he probably doesn't feel too good about having to adhere to a rehydration clause on top of that. I'm sure he's probably thinking, hey, it's either I come down to the catch weight with no rehydration clause or this fight don't happen. And that appears, according to sources, quote unquote, to be the hold up here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How do you feel about the prospect of a rehydration clause in this situation? I think that if Eubank Jr. isn't happy with it, then he shouldn't take the fight. Because boxing is full of fighters who make decisions that they go on to regret later on down the line. Canelo Alvarez, of course, took a fight at a catch weight against Mayweather. He was drained. And he himself offered to fight at that catch weight. And that's why Mayweather eventually took the fight. Because Canelo was pursuing the Mayweather fight for a while before that. Excuse me. He was pursuing the Mayweather fight for a while before that. But it took for him to say that he'll come down to this catch weight for Mayweather to finally agree. Did Canelo regret that decision? I suspect he did. But then again, perhaps he looks at it in a different way, in the sense that it was a learning experience, the Mayweather fight. But if he could do it all over again, the point I'm making is, would he fight at the catch weight? And I'm not sure if there was a rehydration clause or not. I can't remember now. Would he have chosen to do that? Now, you could say that, oh, Mayweather would have beaten him anyway, even without a rehydration clause or a catch weight or whatever. Yeah, but Canelo doesn't know that in his head. Do you see what I'm saying? So it all comes down to how the fighter feels about the decision that he's made. If Chris Eubank Jr. agrees to a catch weight, agrees to a rehydration clause, goes in there against Conor Benn and either gets beat, which in most people's minds would be unthinkable, or wins and doesn't look very good, again, maybe he'll regret draining himself to such an extent. So, interesting that the negotiations are apparently held up over this. There's a lot of talk. I was going to do a separate video about this, but I could just talk about it briefly here. There's a lot of talk about how significant this fight could be for DAZN. And people are saying that this is going to make up for the fact that DAZN didn't manage to secure, apparently haven't managed to secure, the AJ Usyk rematch on their network. And people are saying that this will drive subscriptions to DAZN because of the nostalgia. Because Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn were household names in the UK. They were fighting on terrestrial television and drawing millions and millions of viewers. I've referenced this particular fight in the past. It's one of the best fights I've ever seen in Nigel Benn versus Gerald McClellan. I remember watching that fight with my brother, and we were just, it's as if we were in the arena. That's how excited we were and living every punch, etc. That fight was watched by 17 million people in the UK. Now, the population of the UK in 1995, whenever that fight happened, I think it was around 95, the population in the UK back then might have been a shade under 60 million. and you've got 17 million people watching the fight. Just think about those numbers, right? You're talking about, just short of a third of the entire population of the country watching that fight. Huge. Okay. So Benn and Eubank are still brand names and household names in Britain. And for the nostalgia, people would be very curious, very interested in watching Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. And there's a lot of talk that the dads will be heavily involved in the promotion of the fight, as they should be. From a business perspective, from a marketing perspective, it would be madness if they weren't involved in the promotion of the fight. So, yeah, it's an interesting one because I've never been someone that is necessarily against these fights between people of different weight divisions. I've never been that against it in principle because you're not forcing one guy to do something. It's like when Kell Brook went up to fight Gennady Golovkin. Nobody forced him to do it. People were having a go at Eddie Hearn and saying that he ruined Brook's career. He's giving Brook opportunities. If Brook decides that he doesn't want to take those opportunities, then that's on him. And if he does decide to take it, that's on him as well. He had the chance to unify with Jesse Vargas, and he decided to abandon that and go fight Golovkin. You see? So I don't begrudge Eddie Hearn providing his fighter at the time. Kell Brook is, of course, retired now, but at the time, providing him with an opportunity. Brook had expressed interest in facing Golovkin previously. Do you know what I mean? So it's one of them ones. I believe that the fighter, if they're going to make money, then, hey, it's their choice. If they want to step up 2 divisions and fight one of the biggest punchers in Gennady Golovkin, right? It's their choice. Kell Brook, at the end of the day, Anyway, let me not talk about Kell Brook. I'm getting sidetracked here. Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. In this case, it's Conor Benn's decision whether he wants to fight Eubank Jr. at this. And let's think about this for a second. It will be a catch weight, which means that Conor Benn is fighting above his natural weight too. So he's fighting above his natural weight. Eubank Jr. is fighting below his natural weight. They're meeting in the middle. So I'm sure Conor Benn will be coming from that perspective like, okay, you're being drained a little bit, but I'm going up. But in terms of strength, going up in a bit in weight usually adds more strength to you, whereas coming down in weight usually takes strength away from you. You see it? So, I don't know. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you interested in this fight at all? Do you think it's ridiculous? Is it a fight that you think is shameful and shouldn't be happening? Or, like me, are you quite curious to see how it plays out in the ring? And yeah, there's certainly an element of nostalgia there. The legacies of the dads and now the sons are fighting. There's an element of nostalgia. But at the same time, I think stylistically it's interesting. Conor Benn is a lot faster than anybody Eubank Jr. is used to fighting because of how small he is, right? And Conor Benn has proven himself over the past few years to be a real good puncher. We don't know whether he's an elite level puncher yet, but against the opposition he's been facing of late, he's looked devastating. I mean, look what he did to Chris Algieri. Look what he did to Van Heerden. So can that power carry up? Could he do the unthinkable and actually hurt Chris Eubank Jr.? Imagine how embarrassing that would be for Eubank Jr. to be getting hurt or dropped, or even more unthinkable, stopped by Conor Benn. Is it possible? You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and it's 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment. You can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.